The Sh'raani Ascendancy moved through the galaxy with the serene confidence of a species that had long ago mastered the fundamental laws of the universe. Their technology was not merely functional, it was art. Their starships were elegant, crystalline structures that sang in the void, their hulls woven from monatomic filaments and powered by contained paradoxes. Their weapons didn't fire crude plasma bolts. They de-resolved reality, unmaking their targets with a gentle, almost apologetic shimmer of light. War, for the Sh'raani, was a distasteful but sometimes necessary application of their sublime understanding of physics, a surgical procedure performed with tools of exquisite complexity. Their society was a reflection of their technology. It was a civilization of artists, philosophers, and theoretical physicists. Every object, from a personal datapad to a planetary atmospheric processor, was designed with a breathtaking and often wildly impractical level of intricate detail. A Sh'raani nutrient dispenser didn't just produce food, it synthesized a nutritionally perfect, aesthetically pleasing meal based on the user's current emotional state and the subtle harmonic resonances of the surrounding environment. It was, in short, a masterpiece of unnecessary complexity. When the Sh'raani Ascendancy first encountered the Terran Federation, their initial reaction was one of profound, almost pitying, bewilderment. Human technology was, to their refined sensibilities, brutally, offensively simplistic. Our ships were ugly, asymmetrical blocks of welded metal, belching plasma from crude, inefficient engines. Our weapons were barbaric, relying on the brutish principles of kinetic impact and thermal energy transfer. Our society was a chaotic mess of competing ideologies, our art a cacophony of emotional noise. High Artificer's zeal, a Sh'raani of impeccable taste and profound intellect, was tasked with analyzing this new primitive species. His report to the Ascendancy's ruling council was a masterpiece of understated condescension. Species designation. Human, Zeal's melodious voice chimed in the council chamber. They are a species of tinkers, of brute force problem solvers. Their technology shows a remarkable lack of subtlety, a near-total disregard for the elegant interplay of fundamental forces. They do not weave reality, they bludgeon it into submission. Their starships are, for lack of a more charitable term, flying ironmongeries. The Sh'raani Council, after a period of serene contemplation, deemed humanity to be a Tier 7 developing species. A primitive but potentially useful race that could, with centuries of benevolent guidance, perhaps one day appreciate the finer points of quantum chromodynamics and the aesthetic beauty of a perfectly balanced energy field. The first conflict arose, as it so often did, over a misunderstanding of galactic property law. Humanity had established a mining colony in a resource-rich asteroid belt that, according to ancient Sh'raani star charts, lay within their sphere of aesthetic influence. The Sh'raani sent a diplomatic vessel to gently, but firmly, request that the humans remove their ugly, noisy mining equipment from this region of serene cosmic beauty. The human response, a blunt refusal to abandon a multi-trillion credit mining operation, was seen as an act of primitive aggression. The Sh'raani, with a collective, sorrowful sigh, dispatched a small pacification fleet to dismantle the human colony with minimal, aesthetically pleasing force. The war, a conflict humanity, would later call the Scrap War, had begun. The Sh'raani pacification fleet was a vision of elegance. 3 Sunweaver-class cruisers, their crystalline hulls shimmering with captured starlight, approached the human mining colony of Prospect's Folly. Their mission was simple: de-resolve the human mining platforms and the small brutish Terran Defense Force flotilla that protected them. On the bridge of the TDFS Stalwart, a battered, over-engineered destroyer that had seen better days, Commander Eva Rostova watched the Sh'raani ship's approach. Her vessel was a testament to human practicality. Its armor was thick, its weapon systems redundant, and its engine was a barely controlled fusion reaction that roared and shuddered with every course correction. It was, by Sh'raani standards, a technological travesty. "They're beautiful. I'll give them that," Rostova's tactical officer, a young man named Ben Carter, muttered, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "Looks like they're made of glass." "Let's see how well glass holds up to a Mac round," Rostova growled. "All ships load kinetic slugs. Ignore their energy fields. We're not trying to out-pretty them, just punch a hole in them." The Sh'raani, accustomed to their de-resolution beams simply unmaking their targets, were not prepared for the sheer, brutal simplicity of human weaponry. The Stalwart and its sister ships unleashed a volley of magnetic accelerator cannon rounds. Essentially, massive chunks of solid tungsten fired at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The Sh'raani ship's energy shields, designed to deflect sophisticated energy attacks, flared and held against the first impacts. But the kinetic energy was immense. The Sunweaver cruisers, for all their elegance, were delicate. Their monatomic filament hulls, while incredibly strong, were not designed for brute force impact. A second volley of Mac rounds struck the lead Sh'raani cruiser. Its shields overloaded with a flash of brilliant light. A tungsten slug, a simple, unguided piece of metal, tore through the ship's crystalline hull, shattering the elegant structure and causing a catastrophic depressurization. The beautiful ship, a masterpiece of Sh'raani engineering, tumbled silently in the void. A silent testament to the undeniable effectiveness of a very big, very fast rock. The Sh'raani were stunned. This was not the elegant surgical warfare they were accustomed to. This was a bar fight. The humans were not engaging them on a level of technological sophistication. They were simply throwing heavy objects at them. The remaining two Sh'raani cruisers, their serene composure shattered, unleashed their de-resolution beams. One of the Terran destroyers, the Indomitable, was caught in the shimmering field. It did not explode. It simply ceased to exist, its component atoms unwritten from reality. But the humans, with their long and bloody history of attrition, had factored in losses. As the Indomitable vanished, the rest of the Terran flotilla pressed their attack, their Mac cannons firing relentlessly. The Sh'raani, horrified by the sheer, unartistic brutality of the human tactics, and having lost one of their priceless vessels to a primitive projectile, did the only logical thing a hyper-advanced, aesthetically sensitive species could do. They retreated. The Battle of Prospect's Folly, as it came to be known, was a messy, brutal, and utterly inelegant affair. And it was a stunning human victory. The Sh'raani Ascendancy was in a state of profound philosophical crisis. They had been defeated, not by a superior technology, but by a demonstrably inferior one. Their beautiful, complex warships had been shattered by what was, in essence, a very large, very fast slingshot. High Artificer Zale was tasked with understanding this baffling turn of events. He and his team of philosopher engineers spent weeks analyzing the data from the battle. Their conclusions were deeply unsettling. The humans operate on a principle we have long since abandoned, Zale reported to the council. A philosophy of good enough. Their technology is not designed for perfection. It is designed for functionality and, most importantly, for resilience and ease of repair. He displayed a holographic schematic of a human Mac cannon. It was a crude, brutalist design, a series of massive magnetic coils that were prone to overheating and required constant manual maintenance. A Sh'raani energy lance, by contrast, was a self-regulating, perfectly calibrated instrument of immense complexity. But, Zil continued, a damaged human cannon can be repaired in the field by a single technician with a wrench and a basic understanding of electromagnetism. A damaged Sh'raani energy lance requires a team of quantum physicists and a specialized dry dock facility. In a prolonged engagement, the humans can maintain a higher rate of fire simply because their technology is dumber. This philosophy permeated every aspect of human military design. Our ships were ugly because they were modular, their components easily swappable. Our engines were inefficient because they could run on a variety of unrefined fuel sources. Our computer systems were a chaotic mess of competing operating systems, but this very lack of centralization made them incredibly resistant to electronic warfare. The Sh'raani, in their pursuit of perfection, had created a military that was a beautiful, delicate, and ultimately fragile glass cannon. The humans, in their pragmatic embrace of good enough, had created a fleet of flying crowbars. Ugly, inefficient, but incredibly difficult to break. The war escalated. The Sh'raani, convinced that the Battle of Prospects Folly was an anomaly, deployed a larger, more powerful fleet. They were met by a new, even more terrifyingly simple human innovation, the asteroid ship. Humanity, lacking the resources to build a fleet of capital ships to match the Sh'raani, had resorted to a more direct approach. They had hollowed out large asteroids, strapped massive fusion drives to them, and filled them with a skeleton crew and a dizzying array of Mac cannons and missile tubes. These stoneworms, as they were nicknamed, were slow, clumsy, and had all the aesthetic grace of a flying brick. But they were also incredibly durable. Sh'raani de-resolution beams struggled to unmake an object that was, for all intents and purposes, a mountain. The war became a clash of philosophies. The Sh'raani, with their elegant surgical strikes, found themselves fighting an enemy that simply absorbed the damage and kept on fighting. They were trying to perform a delicate operation on a patient who was actively hitting them with a sledgehammer. The true genius of human simplification, however, was not just in their weapons, but in their people. The Sh'raani military was composed of specialists, each trained for a specific, highly complex task. A Sh'raani engineer was a master of quantum fluid dynamics. A Sh'raani pilot was an artist of gravitational maneuvering. Human crews were different. They were generalists, trained in a dozen different skills, none of them to the level of Sh'raani perfection, but all of them to a level of practical functional competence. A human engineer might not be able to design a paradox drive, but they could sure as hell patch a ruptured plasma conduit with a piece of scrap metal and a whole lot of thermal tape. Sergeant Marcus Mac Macmillan, a distant, perhaps even ancestral, relative of the Mac Macmillan who would one day fight the Xylos, was a chief engineering petty officer on the TDFS Hammerhead, a stoneworm-class asteroid ship. Mac was not a theoretical physicist. He was a mechanic, a plumber, a man who understood the brutal physical realities of keeping a machine running. During a particularly brutal engagement in the Orion Nebula, the Hammerhead took a direct hit from a Sh'raani de-resolution beam. The beam, though partially deflected by the asteroid's sheer bulk, managed to vaporize a significant portion of the ship's primary power distribution node. The lights flickered and died. The Mac cannons fell silent. The Hammerhead was dead in the water. According to Sh'raani tactical doctrine, the ship was now a non-threat, a casualty to be ignored as they moved on to the next target. In the dark, chaos-filled engineering bay of the Hammerhead, Mac and his team were already at work. "All right, you useless lumps," Mac roared, his voice echoing in the darkness, illuminated only by the frantic beams of their headlamps. "The primary node is slag. We're switching to the auxiliary conduits. I want a full bypass routed through the secondary life support system, and someone get me a goddamn wrench." The Sh'raani power distribution system was a marvel of elegant, self-regulating energy flow. The human system was a mess of thick, heavily insulated cables, manual circuit breakers, and multiple redundant backups. It was ugly, but it was survivable. For the next hour, Mac and his team worked in a frantic, grease-stained ballet of improvised engineering. They cut through bulkheads with plasma torches, rerouted power cables by hand, and physically hammered jammed circuit breakers back into place. It was a brutal, ugly, and utterly inelegant process. But it worked. With a deafening groan and a shower of sparks, the hammerhead's lights flickered back on. Its Mac cannons, now powered by the ship's life support system, meaning the crew would be on emergency oxygen for the rest of the battle, roared back to life. The Sh'raani cruiser that was beginning its leisurely, triumphant pass was suddenly rocked by a fresh volley of tungsten slugs. The Sh'raani commander, in the final moments before his beautiful ship was torn apart, could only stare in utter disbelief. The primitive, dead ship had somehow come back to life. This scene was repeated across the fleet. Human ships, disabled and left for dead, would suddenly roar back to life, their systems jury-rigged, their crews fighting with a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The Sh'raani were fighting an army of zombies, a fleet that simply would not die. The war was taking a profound psychological toll on the Sh'raani. Their entire worldview, their belief in the inherent superiority of elegance and complexity, was being systematically dismantled by a species of brutish, pragmatic apes. High Artificer Zyle, now in charge of the Sh'raani war effort, struggled to understand. He analyzed every battle, every human technological innovation. He saw their crude but effective kinetic weapons, their ugly but resilient asteroid ships, their chaotic but surprisingly robust systems. But he still couldn't quite grasp the underlying philosophy. He finally found a clue in a captured human data slate, a personal log from a deceased engineering officer. The log was filled with technical specifications, repair notes, and a surprising number of profanities. One entry, in particular, stood out to Zeal. The main coolant pump is shot to hell. Had to bypass it with the emergency fire suppression system. It's a kludge, but it'll hold. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it is broke, fix it with a bigger hammer. Fix it with a bigger hammer, Zeal repeated, the words feeling alien and barbaric in his melodious voice. This was it. This was the core of human engineering philosophy. It wasn't about understanding the problem on a fundamental level. It was about applying a simple, effective solution, no matter how crude. The Sh'raani, in their elegant sophistication, had forgotten how to use a hammer. Zeal, in a desperate attempt to adapt, tried to implement some of humanity's simplification principles into the Sh'raani military. He proposed building smaller, more modular ships. He suggested incorporating redundant, manually operated systems. His proposals were met with outrage. "You would have us build ugly ships?" one council member chimed, horrified. "You would have us abandon the elegance of our self-regulating systems for the barbarism of manual labor?" another added. The Sh'raani culture, so steeped in its own perfection, was incapable of adapting. They could not bring themselves to embrace the philosophy of good enough. The war had reached a stalemate. The Sh'raani, for all their technological superiority, could not achieve a decisive victory against an enemy that simply refused to stay dead. The humans, for all their resilience, could not hope to truly conquer a civilization as vast and powerful as the Sh'raani Ascendancy. It was humanity, of course, that devised the final, brutally simple solution. They didn't try to build a superweapon. They didn't try to outmaneuver the Sh'raani fleet. Instead, they identified the single critical linchpin of the entire Sh'raani war effort, a massive, beautiful, and incredibly complex Stargate that the Sh'raani used to transport their fleets across the galaxy. The Stargate was a marvel of Sh'raani engineering, a structure of woven light and contained space-time that was considered utterly indestructible. It was the heart of their logistical network, the key to their rapid, elegant deployments. Humanity's plan was not to destroy it. They couldn't. Their weapons were too crude. Their plan was to turn it off. A single heavily modified human stealth ship, the Quiet Crow, crewed by a small team of engineers and saboteurs, slipped past the Sh'raani defenses. Their mission was not to fight, but to reach the Stargate's primary control station. They found the station to be a place of serene, automated beauty. There were no guards, no manual overrides. The Stargate was controlled by a single, impossibly complex AI, its processes a symphony of quantum calculations. The human team didn't try to hack the AI. They didn't try to reprogram it. They did something much simpler. They found the Stargate's primary power conduit, a shimmering beam of pure energy that flowed from a nearby star. And then, using a series of high-yield, precisely placed explosive charges, they blew it up. It was the cosmic equivalent of pulling the plug. The Stargate, deprived of its power source, flickered and died. The shimmering structure of woven light collapsed into a silent, inert ring of metal. The Sh'raani fleet, scattered across the galaxy, was stranded. Their elegant, warp-capable ships could still travel, but the journey back to their core worlds would now take centuries, not weeks. Their logistical network was shattered. Their war effort was, in a single, brutally simple act of sabotage, completely and utterly crippled. The Sh'raani Ascendancy, humbled and defeated, sued for peace. The war ended not with a grand final battle, but with the quiet, ignominious silence of a dead machine. High Artificer Zeal, in the final peace negotiations, met with a human delegation led by a surprisingly young, surprisingly unkempt woman who introduced herself as a systems analyst. "We do not understand," Zeal chimed, his voice filled with a genuine, profound confusion. "You had the opportunity to destroy our fleet, to conquer our worlds. Why? Why did you simply turn off our Stargate?" The human analyst, a woman, who had spent the war orchestrating the chaotic dance of human logistics, just smiled. "Because it was easier," she said. "It was the simplest solution, and it got the job done." The Sh'raani, in the long, quiet centuries that followed, began a slow, painful process of introspection. They did not abandon their pursuit of elegance and beauty, but they began to temper it with a new, grudging respect for the principles of simplicity and resilience. They started building ships with manual overrides. They started teaching their engineers the forgotten art of fixing things with a wrench. Humanity, the brutish, pragmatic tinkers, had taught the galaxy's most advanced civilization a profound and humbling lesson. They had proven that in a universe of infinite complexity, sometimes the greatest strength lies in the elegant, brutal, and undeniable power of a simple solution. The age of the philosopher-engineer was not over, but it now had to make room for the grease-stained, foul-mouthed, and utterly indispensable mechanic. The galaxy had learned to appreciate the crowbar,